They say Earth is home, but what if home was a compromise? I think about this sometimes. Late at night, when the wind presses against the glass and the stars feel too still. I imagine standing barefoot on soil not made of earth, under a sky that breathes in colors we've never named. The air would taste different there. Not cleaner, just right. Like it had always waited for someone to inhale it. Maybe we've mistaken familiarity for perfection. After all, life doesn't demand this planet, only the right ingredients. Liquid water, a stable orbit, time. But what if there are planets not just habitable, but better? Older, warmer, more patient with life. Worlds that never knew extinction events or poisoned atmospheres. Worlds that never had to heal from their own violence. What if we're clinging to a pale draft of something much more refined? A rough sketch of habitability, while the masterpiece glows faintly in some other sky. We call them superhabitable. Planets that outshine our Earth, not with spectacle, but with quiet precision. Slightly larger, slightly older, orbiting calmer stars with steadier rhythms, like a metronome designed not for chaos, but for growth. Take KOI 5751, 3,000 light-years away, yet astonishingly familiar. It drifts through the Goldilocks zone of its sun, not too hot, not too cold, where liquid water could pool and ripple across its surface. Its mass, just enough to hold a thicker atmosphere. Its age, perhaps 1 billion years senior to our solar system. That's 1 billion more years for rivers to carve meaning into stone, for roots to spread, for ecosystems to practice being alive. On Earth, life clawed its way through cataclysms, asteroid impacts, ice ages, mass extinctions. But imagine a world where life never had to start over, where evolution was a smooth arc, not a broken climb. On such a planet, intelligence could have emerged 100 million years ago and looked up at their own stars wondering if they were alone. And somewhere, maybe, they're wondering the same thing about us. But beauty, too, can be deceptive. Not every promise of life is a refuge. Some are riddles wrapped in silence. Consider Kepler 69c, 7 billion years old, ancient by our standards, orbiting a gentler star, perhaps bathing its surface in amber twilight. But it may be too massive, too heavy. A world where gravity presses harder on your chest, where mountains wear down faster, where oceans might stretch like glass across a single giant continent. And in the center of that landmass, a desert wide enough to erase memory. No winds, no birds, just heat. Or Speculus 2c. Close, comparatively, only 106 light-years away. But it clings to a red dwarf so tightly that one side never sees night and the other never sees day. Light without shadow, darkness without dawn. In between a narrow band, the Terminator zone where dusk is eternal. And maybe, just maybe, something lives there. Something that learned to exist at the edge. Forever caught between extremes, we look for perfection. But perhaps life doesn't want perfection. Perhaps it wants contrast, challenge, a tension between too much and not enough. Maybe that's the real Goldilocks. There's a silence in deep space that isn't just the absence of sound, it's the absence of witness. A silence that stretches across light years, waiting for someone, something to notice it. I picture these worlds, KOI 575001, Kepler 69c, Speculus 2c, not as maps or models but as living questions. Planets turning slowly in the dark, their atmospheres whispering to themselves, their oceans thinking in waves. We study them through flickers, dips in starlight, spectral hints of oxygen or methane. But these are just shadows of truth. The real stories lie beneath those clouds, in the texture of the soil, in the rhythm of a foreign breeze. And yet, maybe they are lifeless. Maybe every one of them is beautiful and stillborn. It's a hard thought that the universe could sculpt so many exquisite settings and leave them empty. Like theaters without actors, gardens without seasons, suns that rise for no one. But even that kind of loneliness teaches us something. That life is not a guarantee, but a rarity. Not a right, but a psalm. Fragile, improbable, and unspeakably precious when it appears. And here we are, humming it into the void. So, what if Earth was never the ideal? What if we're not the crown jewel of biology, but a rough draft that happened to survive long enough to ask questions? A planet with just enough balance to spark life, but not enough to nurture it gently. We live on a world that freezes and burns, floods and dries, shudders with quakes and drowns in its own storms. A world that made us sharp, adaptable, hungry. And yet there could be others. Worlds with softer edges, where the seasons shift like breath, where lightning is rare and the skies rarely shout, planets that favor continuity over chaos, where evolution isn't forced to improvise, but allowed to compose. And if such places exist, why haven't we heard from them? Maybe civilizations on those planets didn't rush to conquer or broadcast. Maybe they never needed to. Maybe comfort makes you slow, deliberate, or quiet, or inward. Or maybe they burned bright long before we ever crawled out of our oceans and turned to dust, unnoticed, under a sky we hadn't yet learned to see. What if we're not just late to the party, but walking through its ashes? I sometimes wonder what Earth would look like to them. If someone, light years away, pointed a telescope at our pale world, what would they see? A blue shimmer, a trembling signal in the static. Maybe the dim echo of cities, of movement, of music. Maybe they wouldn't see us at all, just a small, noisy planet circling a quiet star. But maybe that's enough, because in the great dark, even a whisper carries far. And our whisper is strange and flawed and wild. We've erupted from extinction, rewritten ourselves with fire and fear, hurled machines into the void and called it curiosity. We are not perfect. We are not the best. But we are here, and that counts for something. Maybe Earth was never meant to be paradise. Maybe it was meant to be a spark. The first match struck in a cold, endless night. Not the end point, but the opening note. So I ask again, what if Earth was never the best place for life? And what if that's exactly what makes it beautiful?